Hello and welcome to RAF Fairford on this very special occasion for the Royal Air Force. The International Air Tattoo, Britain's biggest air show, has been held here in the heart of the Cotswolds for 10 years. But this year is the 50th anniversary of VE and VJ Day. And for the Royal Air Force, it's the official commemoration of those events. This is the Victory Air Show. As always, though, there are many themes to the International Air Tattoo. We'll be seeing aerobatic teams from all over the world. We'll be looking at planes which flew in the very first air shows 75 years ago. And from old to new, the Eurofighter 2000, which has never been seen at an air display before. And finally, we'll be watching the Victory fly past, an international parade of aircraft from many nations who are here to celebrate 50 years of peace. Well, all that's to come. We start, though, with a display team on its first trip to Britain. The Iskras are from Poland. The commentator, Sean Mafford.
Here's the Team Iskra with their TS-11 aircraft, shot from the Hawk chase plane. These TS-11s, produced by WSK Mielek of Poland, they had high hopes at one time of making them the standard trainer for the Warsaw Pact countries, but they failed in favour of the Czech L-29 Meyer aircraft. But the Poles went on to build them anyway. Most of them are two-seat trainers with one pilot in front of the other. And here they are with 6 of them doing a great big loop. And isn't it lovely to see those puffy clouds in the background? You always need clouds in the background of a flying display. It kind of frames all the pictures for you and just puts it all into perspective. Here we are in the back cockpit. This is our in-cockpit camera. The pilot is in the cockpit in front, in case you're wondering. You can just see the other aircraft in the top of the picture there, in close formation. And there's a lovely view of the colour scheme of this rather strange-looking aircraft. Now here he's doing an outside turn, lots of negative G, the blood rushing to his head, his eyes turning pink, his vision going pink at the edges. Very uncomfortable, probably pushing something like -4 negative G. And a mirror formation here. We're going to see quite a lot of these. One aircraft upside down in formation with the other, but very elegantly done. And of course, all aerobatic teams have to have a dramatic break. Here we go. Break, break, go. And here we are back in the cockpit for the landing. You can see from the stick he's feeling around for it. The ground's there somewhere. There it is. Very nice too.
Well, flying conditions here at Fairford just about perfect. And that's good news for the 140,000 people who are here this weekend. All the money raised will go to the RAF Benevolent Fund. The International Air Tattoo is staffed entirely by volunteers. Not even the air traffic controllers are paid, and they've got a pretty busy job. This year there are almost 400 aircraft from 29 countries. Things have come a long way since the very first air shows. In this country it all started at Hendon Airfield on the outskirts of London. That was exactly 75 years ago. And some of the aircraft types which took part in those early shows are here today.
Well, of course, no show at Hendon was complete without something like a fort or a rebel village being set up and completely destroyed by bombing of various aircraft. So at Fairford, we have exactly that, a fort about to be destroyed. One of the aircraft involved, this Flycatcher, is actually the only one of this group that isn't a genuine one. This is a replica, but it's a beautifully made one, the Fairy Flycatcher. That looks to be quite a well-made bomb as well. And here's one of the 2 genuine originals. This is an Avro 504, and these aircraft did appear at the very first Hendon show in 1920. This started life as a bomber, but became the RAF's probably most famous trainer. And here's a slightly later trainer, 1930s, a yellow-painted Tutor. And looking along from our wingtip mounted camera, you get a good view of that big radial engine, the Armstrong Siddeley Lynx. And its beautifully polished cowling. Here's the other genuine original that also appeared in 1920, the Royal Aircraft Factory SE-5A, one of the great fighters of the First World War. And to bomb from this one, you had to hold bombs over the side, I think. But here's a more modern one. This is the Gladiator biplane. This was the last of the RAF's operational biplanes. It went on just about, in fact, it did serve in the Second World War. And the beautiful Czech Hind bomber. Now, this is a real bomber, and in fact, you can see the racks under the wings from where they used to drop those bombs. Part of a long line of aircraft that eventually ended up with the Harrier. Well, now this aircraft probably looks about the same age as the Hind, but in fact it saw service in the Second World War all the way through to the end with the Royal Navy, whereas the Hind went out of service with the Royal Air Force long before the Second World War started. This, the fairy swordfish, affectionately known as the string bag, this one was actually made by Blackburns, which makes it a blackfish. And there's the Navy in true naval style with the ensign in the background, saluting as they pass by. Lysander was affectionately known as the Lizzie, and it was actually an Army cooperation aeroplane, but it was perhaps best known for its work with the SOE, the Special Operations Executive. They used to drop and pick up agents behind the enemy lines. You can see that ladder sticking down on the far side with which they used to climb in and out of the aeroplane. Now, one of the pilots who did that job with great distinction remembers the kind of landing strips that they had to get into.
They were small, they were very small, and with luck there was a signal waiting for you to show you it was all clear to land. Technically, you should have gone back if the signal was not correct, because the Germans might have taken over and tortured the resistance chap to make him send his signal. But having gone all that way, you know, I was very, very reluctant to get back. And then you spotted the three torches. They then lit up the three torches, which gave you the length of the airfield. It's normally about 300 or 400 yards. Very small, actually. You then waded up to see whether there were any wires that you could see in the darkness, or high trees, you know, that you might hit. And then put everything in reverse and came down. And of course the Lizzie had a marvelously strong undercarriage, and you could really thump it down. That was all right as long as the ground wasn't soggy.
Well, now, interestingly, the Blenheim has two of the same engines that the Lysander had, but whereas the Lysander is a very slow aeroplane, the Blenheim was an extremely fast one. In fact, when it was first built in 1934, it was faster than any of the RAF fighters. It was originally designed as an executive aircraft for the newspaper magnate Lord Rothermere, but it was so fast and so efficient that the Air Ministry immediately snapped it up and it became the Type 142. This particular one is a Mark IV version, which was the fighter version. Nearly 3,300 of these were delivered to the RAF. Extremely successful they were too. This aircraft belongs to the British Aerial Museum, who rebuilt it absolutely immaculately down to the last detail, and it's flown by one of its engineers, John Romaine.
The International Air Tattoo is always host to royal visitors. Prince Michael of Kent, a pilot himself, meeting just a few of the 6,000 World War II veterans at the show. And some have been enjoying VIP status themselves. 12 former pilots arrived by Tiger Moth, one representing each of the World War II service commands.
Gorgeous flight.
Lovely.
Shall we do it again?
Yeah, it'd be great to, wouldn't it?
And here, two famous Mosquito pilots, Sir Ivor Broome, one of the few men to hold the DFC with 2 bars, and John Cunningham, later to be de Havilland Chief Test Pilot. Cat's Eyes Cunningham, he was called, and this is why.
Radar was still very secret, and the Air Ministry felt that they had to produce some reason why I had success at night. And so they said I had exceptional night vision, which wasn't true at all. It was purely to cover up the fact that we were using radar And so that stuck with me, and I was told by the Air Ministry I'd got to accept that this story was going to be put out to hide the fact that we had radar.
The multi-role Mosquito, which played such a vital part in the war effort, and we'll be seeing it later in the programme.
Now this immaculately painted aircraft used to be the RAF's basic trainer. In fact, the Royal Air Force was the first air arm to introduce all-through jet training. Pupils would start on this jet aircraft and progress onto the Hawk, which we shall see in a moment. But it doesn't use the Jet Provost any longer. This one is civilian-owned by a gentleman called Eddie Todd. It used to be a Linton-on-Ouse aircraft, and it was fully restored at Linton. It's now exactly as it was when it was in Air Force service, except that it doesn't have any ejector seats. And pupils from the Jet Provost went on to the Hawk, the advanced trainer. That is very much still in service, not only with the Red Arrows, but as with this one at Royal Air Force Valley, where pupils are trained in advanced flying, not only in the techniques of actually flying, but also the techniques of combat, because some of these aircraft can be armed. This one is in the standard colour scheme of these aircraft now, which is a black colour, because that apparently is very high visibility. The only addition for the display aircraft are these rather elegant yellow stripes. And here, a rather favourite aerobatic manoeuvre, the hesitation roll, going through 45 degrees at a time. There's a stop on each of the 45-degree points. We're just about to get into the knife edge there, and another 45-degree stop, and then back to horizontal. That's Flight Lieutenant Don Rich, the Hawk display pilot.
And here's the RAF's initial trainer, the Tucano, flown here by Squadron Leader Mike Johnson. He's a full-time instructor at RAF Linton-on-Ouse. For this display, Mike agreed to let us mount a camera on his helmet, and he's going to talk us through his routine. We join the aircraft coming out of a stalled turn.
In the vertical, centering up, checking the speed, checking the Q height, 1300. Back towards ground center. This is pulling up for a quarter clover. We'll be rolling left. There we go. And two inverted, reorientated to the A-axis. Down to the A-axis again at display center. And we'll roll inverted here. About 200 knots now and pushing up. Push now to -2.5 G, pitching up upside down. I'm looking for a Q height here of 1500 feet. Now I'm beginning to flatten it out, peaking at 1800, down into vertical again, keeping full power on. I want 210 knots now for the 4-point hesitation roll. First point, inverted second point, crowd center. Third point, and erect again. And now penetrating, I want a little bit more room, so one roll of an aileron roll, and I'm going to pitch up again with the air brake out, slowing down, throttled right back here. I don't want to go too high for another stall turn, just checking the speed, 80 knots again now. All right, here, selecting the gear down, selecting the flap down, leaving the air brake out, and now I'm settling the aircraft at 110 knots, 110, 115 knots with the gear and the flap down, with the aim to land at crowd center.
Squadron Leader Mike Johnson in the Tucano.
now here are the Reds getting into their basic formation shape, the Diamond 9. They've been doing this since they very first started, but they've got a new idea this year of splitting into a 5 and a 4, and the 4 have a really spectacular break called the Jippo break. Isn't that quite something? And here are the synchro pair who do things in opposition. They fly together at relative speed of more than 700 miles an hour. And they also do maneuvers like this, the revolver. And I said earlier that all aerobatic teams have to have a spectacular break. Well, this one looks pretty good. But just when you think it's all over, you find there's actually more to come.
I'm standing alongside a long line of aircraft that are all the same, and to the seasoned traveller these will look very familiar indeed. The Boeing 707 was the first successful long-range jet airliner. Now the main airlines have long since traded those in for more modern jets, but the military version, the Sky Tanker, is still very much in use, and it's one of the main themes of this year's International Air Tattoo. The specialist air-to-air refueling version of the 707 is known as the KC-135, and some countries have converted civilian 707s for military use. These aircraft have come from all over the world, and besides putting on a show for the public, the crews have been attending a symposium to share their experience. The old Boeings usually have several roles. The Australians use theirs not only to refuel F-18 fighters, but also as transports, as in this flight to Britain.
We did have 80 passengers on board, which was the Royal Australian Air Force drum band, which we brought over for the Royal Tournament that's happening in our court at the moment, I believe. We use it for passenger flying around the world, cargo flying, as you can see. We've got a cargo door there, and we also use it as a VIP aircraft whenever our Prime Minister flies overseas. It's this aircraft that he flies in.
So the Australian Prime Minister travels in a fuel truck. Well, before the show opened to the public, the crews polished up their planes for the concours d'élégance. It takes a long time to make a large working aircraft look as smart as this. And here are the judges.
That's the way to do with ropes, to make it neat. 10, I think. Yeah, I think.
The warning flags are very good.
Excellent, they're very good.
14?
14, okay.
So you see here we've got a lot of effort being put into this. It's an old aeroplane and people have obviously been working very hard. And then you look specifically at the bits of the aircraft. Has it got all its telltale warning flags there? Look at the engine intakes, very brightly polished on this particular aeroplane. So they spent a lot of time on this, and you'd need to know the age, and you give a sort of handicap for if it was a brand new aircraft just off the production line, which is not true of any of these, I might say. They're all old airplanes. But the newer the airplane, the better it's likely to be. So the older ones, if they made a great effort, that will be taken into account. And the enthusiasm of the crews. You'll have crews like this one, all standing around, wanting to show you their airplane, wanting to talk about it. Others you'll find, and mostly the not so well prepared airplanes, the crews have pushed off into Swindon or somewhere.
The eventual winners, this crew from the US Air Force. They'll be taking the Page Trophy back to Ohio.
But Sky Tanker isn't happening only on the ground. Part of the flying display is devoted to it as well. In the lead here, a TriStar, and behind it, one of several VC-10s. You can see the air refueling nozzles trailing on the back of the hoses on that VC-10. The TriStar can also do the same thing. And then behind them, more VC-10s, each with 2 Harriers. They call them chicks when they're more or less in tow like this. They're not actually allowed to be connected to the refueling drogues when they're flying at this low level, but they can be quite close, as you can see. You can also see how turbulent it is as the drogues move up and down in the turbulence. Very difficult for the pilots to formate on it. Coming along behind, 5 Hercules from RAF Lynham, and showing that they too can be involved in the refueling process, because the one in the middle has a drogue streaming out behind it, which the other one behind that could well be plugged into. You can see the probe above the flight deck there. But once again, flapping around in the turbulence, very difficult to catch onto that. And close on the tail of that, another Hercules, but this one's here to do a tactical demonstration. Of course, these aircraft do these kind of things for real all the time. They've operated in the Falklands War, the Gulf War, they've operated with Ethiopian famine relief in Somalia, and of course at the moment in operations in the former Yugoslavia. But here today they're demonstrating how quickly they can get troops into a hostile area. They've landed on this strip, the aircraft screeches to a halt, the ramp comes down as it's stopping, the people in the back rush out and put those big tow ramps down, and the vehicles are out as quick as a flash. With some fairly unfriendly looking troops in them, I have to say. Into action straight away. Meanwhile, the aircraft is backing up the runway to give itself maximum room, and this could be a rough strip. It doesn't have to be a concrete strip, and it's off as quickly as possible to get out of trouble and out of harm's way with the minimum of delay. As soon as he's established, a steep climb out to get him out of small arms fire range before he crosses the boundary of the airfield. Well, now this one is sometimes rather rudely referred to as half a Herc, because you'll notice it has only 2 engines, whereas the Hercules has 4. But this does things that the Hercules can't, and not just the smoke from the engines. This aircraft can do a manoeuvre that pilots on the ground were really looking forward to seeing. Here he's pulling up, he's rolling the thing very sharply. And is he going to go right over? He is. He takes the thing right the way round in a roll, and bear in mind that this is, like the Hercules, a military transport aircraft. Quite astounding. He being Major Luca Rizzi, but we're going to see him do it from the inside of the cockpit now. That's him on the left there. He put the controls fully over as far as they'll go and holds them there while the aircraft goes completely upside down, and then he gradually brings them back as the horizon comes back into the right place. And now an amazing bank from the aircraft, considerably more than 90 degrees, I'd say. And we can rejoin them in the cockpit again as Major Rizzi brings the aircraft down onto the runway. A very popular demonstration with the team from the Reparto Sperimentale Volo, the Italian flight test center. Well, now, strangely, just as the G222 is very popular with the pilots on the ground, this aircraft also, or these 3 aircraft, are particularly popular. And when you look at them, you might wonder why, because they're not exactly the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. But no doubt in the eyes of one of the pilots here, Major Sebesta, they are very lovely. They're certainly very good performers. These are the MIL Mi-24 helicopters of the 331st Attack Squadron of the Czech Republican Air Force. Big gun at the front, 2 cockpits, and all those racks on the side for weapons, guns, bombs, missiles, and rockets. And yet they're strangely graceful, although they do look rather like some enormous insect. Major Sebesta with his co-pilot behind him. And it's this precision of flying that has won for the Czech helicopter display team the Sir Douglas Bader Trophy for the best overall display in the whole air show. Jaguar display marks the start of part of the show which is devoted to British aerospace products. Well, at least British aerospace in conjunction with other companies, because the Jaguar, of course, was a cooperative project with France and was manufactured by a company called Sepicat, of which British aerospace was a part. Very successful the Jaguar has been, as has been the Harrier. Now, this aircraft is now manufactured in conjunction with McDonnell Douglas in the States. This is the Harrier II. In RAF service, it's called the GR7, and the Americans call it the AV-8B. And this aircraft, the fighter version of the Tornado, the F3, is of course another cooperative project, this time with 3 companies and 3 countries, Britain, Italy and Germany. And this is the aircraft that many people have come to the show to see. This is Eurofighter 2000, and it's the most ambitious cooperative project yet. It involves 4 countries, Britain, Germany, Italy and Spain. And IAT 95 is the first occasion on which Eurofighter 2000 has been displayed in public. It's being flown today by John Turner, the British aerospace test pilot who's done most of the testing of this British prototype. And in fact, he's not landing here today because officially this is not a display flight. It's actually a test flight. And while the flight's going on, all of the information that the sensors are gathering in the aircraft is being transmitted by telemetry back to the British aerospace base at Warton. Gavin's been there to see how things are going.
The home of the Eurofighter, and this is the aircraft which has been at Fairford, in fact the only one currently flying in Britain. To date, it's carried out about 30 flights. All the orange wiring you can see here signifies test equipment. In service, the maximum speed will be Mach 2, twice the speed of sound. And the aircraft has extraordinary handling qualities, mostly down to this control surface here, the canard, which provides pitch control. They say it's very easy to fly, and particularly to land. Unfortunately, for security reasons, we weren't allowed to film in the cockpit itself. There's just a glimpse, but I can tell you there's not much that most pilots would recognize. The Eurofighter is designed to pull up to 9G in a turn, which is very tight, but they say in dogfights of the future, it won't be necessary to outturn your opponent.
In the old days, in close-in combat, the person who won was the chap who could turn the hardest, or at least the fastest, and bring his guns to bear on the opponent. Things have come on a long way since then. The missiles that the aircraft is equipped with can actually shoot up into the turn. More importantly, the helmet display and sighting system that I have on my head enables me to look up across a turn in combat, look at the other chap, engage the missiles, swivel the missile heads onto the aggressor, and then fire. So I've got 9G to get into the sort of position that I want to be in, and then I can bring the helmet, drive all the missile heads up, acquire the target, shoot and kill.
So there it is, the fabulous Eurofighter on its first visit to Fairford.
The French team, the Patrie de France, is one of the great favourites at International Air Tattoos. And their little red, white and blue Alpha jets, it's always interesting to compare them with the Hawks of the Red Arrows. But this is a typical piece of Gallic fervour. You might call this an Alpha turnover, I suppose. Like all the big teams, they're constantly changing their formations. They're hardly ever in one shape for any length of time. This shape they call losange. There are only 8 of them, so it could be a diamond, except they don't have one in the middle. But immediately they're changing again, and they're dropping back to form a canard. It doesn't mean duck, it refers to the fact that some aircraft have a little wing at the front. Now, we saw the revolver from the Red Arrows. Here is a similar thing from the French team. And what more appropriate than the music of Jean-Michel Jarre, because the Patrouille appeared over a recent concert of his in Paris. Another very popular French aircraft is this two-seat version of the Mirage 2000. And I think one of the reasons it's popular is that you don't actually expect a delta wing like this to be very maneuverable. But this one is maneuverable because it's fly-by-wire, and the aircraft is actually designed to be unstable, and it's just kept in control by the computers of the fly-by-wire system. So if you really want it to maneuver sharply, then you just let the computers go for a while, and they will take it right up to the edge of the flight envelope till it's almost out of control, and then they'll bring it back into control.
Although around half the aircraft at the show are British, not all are from the Air Force. In fact, the Army's represented too, and here are the Blue Eagles from the Army Air Corps. It's made up of 1 Lynx and 4 Gazelle. And the Lynx helicopter pilot here, Matt McEwen. Matt, you've made a few changes to the display since last year. Why, and what are those changes?
Well, first of all, our priority is to ensure that there's always something going on in the crowd. So we're just trying to change things to keep the crowd guessing. And we've got a couple of new manoeuvres in this year.
Now, what do they entail?
One of them is the bunt by 180 turn, which we've nicknamed the Twizzle. What I do there is that I pull up at a 90 degrees nose up, followed by a 180 degrees to point nose down, then a complete turn for 180 degrees while the aircraft stays from the air.
When vacancies come out for the team, and, how does one go about joining? It must be a scramble to get a place.
You're quite right. There's a lot of competition for to display in the team. And consequently, the pilots that we do get, even though I'm one of them, are of a good calibre.
There they are with the 4 Gazelles on the outside and the Lynx in the middle. The Lynx looking quite a lot bigger than the Gazelles, and the smoke starts from the 2 Gazelles on the wings, going into a banking turn. It's an interesting formation, this, because there are not very many teams that have different aircraft types in the same formation. It seems to work pretty well for the Blue Eagles, and in this case the Red and Green Eagles. There you can see the missiles, the anti-tank missiles on the side of the Lynx. And any minute now he's going to go into the violent manoeuvres that he was talking about. Mac was referring to the Twizzle. And here we go, he's pulling the thing up into the vertical. You can see the horizon disappearing there, the blue sky ahead of him. Suddenly he pushes it down, he's vertically down and twists through that 180 degree turn. Quite uncomfortable inside the aircraft. And there we can see that although the Lynx is better at aerobatics, the Gazelle is no slouch at it either. Now we're going for the famous backflip. The aircraft pulls right up and twists over. It's almost like doing a loop in a fixed-wing aircraft.
And now one of the newest teams on the airshow circuit, though it must be said that the pilots themselves have been in this game for years. Brian Lacombe, here he is on our cockpit camera, has now carried out more than 1,700 air displays in many different types of aircraft. In his spare time, he's a novelist. This year, he's joined by Alan Wade. Together, they formed the new Rover team flying the Extra 300. As they prepared for the team's first appearance at Fairford, we joined them at their home airfield in Buckinghamshire.
Right from the beginning, we concentrated on doing these very difficult negative G manoeuvres in line abreast and looping figures in mirror. And that's, I hope, is giving us the building blocks for a display which will be as good as we can possibly make it. I did make some resolutions when we started this team. One is that we would do no echelon, as echelon formation like that, which is the easy formation. I think it looks untidy with a two-ship. So we are either in line astern, in mirror, or in line abreast, which is obviously a lot more difficult than echelon.
Now Brian's going to talk us through their display routine, in which they pull up to 7G. We join them as they come out of a Cuban 8.
From the bottom of the Cuban, we're now in line abreast, and Alan's formating in line abreast on me. And at the top, I shall call rudder now, and we still turn in unison. From there we pull out onto a down 45 line, And in a moment I shall pull run back. And that runs back about 30, 40 feet. And roll now, pull now. And from crowd centre point, it looks as though we've crossed through each other. Climbing 45, roll, fit. Now pull up again to the vertical. It's a powerful aeroplane. Power off, smoke off, and slide backwards in the tail slide. I think we're the first people to do that in synchronisation.
Well, that's the Rover team's first appearance at Fairford, but for Concorde, it's a sort of return home, because of course the British version of Concorde did much of its flight testing from the airfield here at Fairford. Still the world's only supersonic transport, no other in prospect. In fact, British Airways expect to go on using Concorde until something like 2004. We shall still see this wonderful sight. With something like 100 passengers on board, about to set out on a supersonic trip over the western approaches and then arrive back at Heathrow. Fascinating looking aircraft this, with its canard wing, the foreplane in front of the main delta wing. And the Swedes have a knack of putting themselves ahead of the game. When this aircraft, the Viggen JA-37, Viggen means Thunderbolt, when it came into service in the early 70s, it was undoubtedly the most advanced combat aircraft in Europe. And there we see it once again from our Hawk camera plane. In fact, until Tornado came along some years later, it was still the fastest around, with a speed somewhere around Mach 2. The B-1B does have something in common with the Viggen. It also has those canard foreplanes in front of the main wings. You can just see they're very tiny, sticking down on either side of the cockpit there. In this aircraft, they're to smooth the turbulence at low level, because it flies around the speed of sound at very low levels, and these things smooth the whole path out. On the flight deck, 2 pilots there. There are also 2 systems operators behind them. There are quite a lot of people who think the Frecce Tricolori are the best team in the world. They're certainly the biggest. You don't see anybody else flying 10 aircraft like this, particularly in such close and immaculate formation. But the Frecce also have a dark side to them, because they were involved in that appalling crash at Ramstein in August 1988, when one of the aircraft flew into 2 others. And all 3 pilots were killed, and something like 57 other people were killed amongst the spectators. They have indeed come back from that, and as a result of that crash, many of the regulations to do with air display flying have been changed to ensure that something like that could never happen again. Now, the Frecce have some wonderful Italian style to them. I don't know anybody else who does a tail slide like this. The aircraft's actually going backwards here for a long way before he falls out of the sky. Quite extraordinary. Only the Russians seem to be able to do that with jet aircraft, apart from the Italians.
Well, every member of the public has his or her favourite display, but how about the pilots themselves? Now, you might just think they do their bit and then go back to their hotel, but not a bit of it. Here behind me, they've got their own special enclosure, and as you can see, they make good use of it. So what do they think of the show?
I fly the Lynx myself, so I was most impressed by the Army Lynx, because it makes loops, and we're not allowed to do it. Besides that, the Harrier and Frecce Tricolori.
So far, the Frecce Tricolori. I think that was an amazing show for the formation team.
I was most impressed by the Italian transport plane, which is the G222. It's a 2-engine transport jobber, and the pilot actually rolled the aircraft, and to see that happening, the aircrew around here are actually clapping, because it's such an outstanding event to do at an air show, to roll a transport plane.
Maybe today I have preference for the red arrows, just today, but all the teams are wonderful teams.
Particularly, I was impressed by the French Mirage 2000 that, as far as I'm concerned, I think was flown in a superb way.
So far, I think the Mirage 2000 is a very good aircraft.
Actually, I have to say the Mirage 2000 was my favorite so far. Extremely impressive, the way the maneuverability is just awesome.
And now, as the show draws to a close, it's time to remember the events of 50 years ago. Events which remain fresh in the minds of the many thousands of airmen who fought on both sides during World War II. Many are here for this, the RAF's official commemoration of victory. And of course, without the contribution of the Allied air commands, that victory could never have been achieved. For the final salute, we once again join Sean Mafford.
After all the wonderful displays of so many different varieties of flying, this really is the climax of the whole day. People seem to have stayed on at the show and not drifted away as they often do towards the end of a long day, because they know that something very special is about to happen. In the space of about 15 minutes, that empty runway fills up with more than 40 aircraft, representing, with the national flags, the nations that took part in the war on all sides, and behind them hover the helicopters. On the dais in the centre, the 12 veterans who earlier flew in the Tiger Moths, representing the 12 flying commands of the British services at the end of the war. And in the first of the aerial salutes, those same frail Tiger Moths fly proudly past. The laughter of the earlier day has gone, replaced by a gathering deeper emotion. Over the horizon appears the airman's traditional tribute to a fallen comrade, the missing man formation. 4 aircraft fly in so-called finger 4, positioned like the tips of the extended fingers of your right hand. In the front of the first formation, the Lancaster. On its left, the Mosquito. On its far right, the Hurricane. And between the Hurricane and Lancaster, the Spitfire. At display centre, a maroon fires, and the Spitfire pulls up and out of the formation, leaving an eloquent, empty space to signify the missing man. Next, the Americans. The B-17 Flying Fortress leads, the P-58 Lightning on its left, the P-47 Thunderbolt on its far right, leaving the P-51 Mustang to pull up and salute the missing man. After that come 4 modern-day Royal Air Force Hawk aircraft, and then, in a touching symbol of reconciliation, 4 Tornadoes of the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe. Finally, in the flypasts, a single American B-1 intercontinental bomber. But now, as if the moment were not already sufficiently charged with feeling, from behind the massed aircraft and the helicopters, a small dot materializes into 2 of the Royal Air Force Red Arrows. They write the victory sign on the evening sky, and through it fly a British Spitfire, an American Mustang, and a German Messerschmitt 109. The peace of the evening sky, symbolic perhaps of the half-century that has elapsed since we last espoused global war. And even the weather conspiring to make this a perfect day of celebration and commemoration.